my undergrad set me up for this. The writer's room, I've been there. I've been not allowed to say anything while people are talking about my work is pretty much what like our undergrad set us up with is just kind of listening,
Oh,
which was very difficult.
that's so opposite of how we like to edit here because we want to know from the writer exactly what they're trying to get across. And if
Right.
we're making our notes based on false assumptions, we want you to correct us and like give us more information to work with. Definitely feel free to interrupt us whenever during this session and set us straight. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Fix Stories. This is the podcast where storytellers bring their stuck, tangled, or not quite their stories, and we help them figure out what's working, what's not working, and how to tell their story in the best way possible. So I'm Jaylon. I am one of the editors at One Brilliant Arc, and I have my co-host here with me.
Charles, another editor. Hello, everyone.
And today our special guest is Aspen. Aspen, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to start writing it?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Aspen. I've been working on stories my whole life, would be the best way to say it. Basically, I came up with this based off of an article online about talking about solar flares and what they do and how it can affect society, and it kind of spun off from there, more or less. Not that you would know that based off of the pages you read, probably. But that is where the story origin started. In college, I have a bachelor's in creative writing, and then went on to do a lot of education stuff. So I'm currently a instructor at a local university, um, and it's kind of fallen on a back burner. So I really wanted to get fresh eyes on it and see what people thought, more or less.
That's awesome. Well, we appreciate being trusted as the fresh eyes on this story. I appreciate what you shared that with all of the work that you're doing to help others, your own writing has kind of fallen on the back burner. That's something that I have experienced myself, and I know a lot of other writers have experienced, a lot of writers who come on the show have experienced. And I just want to applaud you for prioritizing the story that's on your heart and getting it told in the way that it deserves. It's not easy to put yourself first like that, but I'm glad that you are.
Appreciate it. It's gone on the back burner for a little too long at this point, I feel like. So it's time to get back in.
Awesome. Well, we'll dig into it today. Do you want to give, just for the audience's sake, and for us, since we only did read the first 10K words, do you want to just give your quick elevator pitch, just the story in like 2 or 3 sentences?
Yeah, so the story follows a basically military recruits in a flashback sequence from the beginning. You are in a state of disrepair where the narrator of the story is Paige, who has found herself on trial for treason and for deserting the military. So it starts off with trying to figure out how she got into this mess and how to get out of it. And that's kind of where we begin our story.
Awesome. So usually we like to dig into, especially here at One Brilliant Arc, our focus on helping writers tell their stories is really digging into the deeper meaning behind their stories. So what was it about this story that made you decide you needed to write it, and who are you writing it for?
That is very based in my own queer story growing up. Um, I am a trans masculine pansexual person. I identify as non-binary, and a lot of this story is about showing them in real time and how people can exist without it being about coming out, without it being about that story, but not disregarding the meaning of coming out and the reality that it's never going to be a perfectly accepted or suitable environment as life exists now or in the future. I don't see it changing as much as I would like it to. So a lot of it is really based in my own just need to ensure that we are represented, which is also kind of how I got into education in the first place, in representing two kids in the school districts in on a college level more acceptingly. So that's kind of where I think it began, and is still like the heart of the story is between Paige and the love of her life.
Gotcha. I really, really appreciate, first of all, I would just want to say you're in the right place. At One Brilliant Arc, we're very much interested in helping writers who have felt marginalized to tell their truth. But I also want to say thank you so much for especially trusting us with this story, because I know that every story that we work with is very personal to the writer on some form, on some level. But this in particular sounds like a story that is very deeply personal to you. So we want to make sure that we're doing it justice, doing your voice justice, and helping you just amplify the truth that you already have there and not change it or twist it to fit into anyone else's box. So all that said, we'll give our disclaimer of this entire session is, yes, it's an editing session. We are editors, so we give you our suggestions from a professional standpoint, but all of them are suggestions. Art in general is very subjective, so any suggestion that we give is up to your discretion to use or not. As Charles said in previous episodes, that I like the way he phrased it. This is all just knowledge. You can take it or leave it. You can use it to inform other things that you may decide. The biggest thing is we just want this to be a conversation that sparks brainstorms for you to find even better words on your own. So you don't have to use any of our suggestions. You might use all of them. It's really up to your discretion. And this isn't supposed to be a session where we're just like pointing the finger at you and ripping apart the story. This is us coming alongside you to help you brainstorm how to tell it even better. So feel free to interrupt us at any time throughout this, share your perspective, ask questions, give us information that we may not know because we didn't read all the way through. Yeah, we'll just have a good time talking about a good story.
Appreciate it.
No problem. All right, so to dive in, we usually start with what's working. So I'm going to share the document that we marked up here on the screen so that you can see what we're talking about. And I will actually let Charles kick it off with all of his notes. And Charles, just let me know when you want me to reference different things here, and I will try to scroll to them.
So I'm not sure if I wrote anything specifically in the notes on what was working. That sounds bad, but stick with me here. But the reason I say that is because I didn't feel the need to remind myself to highlight the good stuff, because it started immediately. And I was like, okay, now this is interesting. And that's really impressive for me. It's very not common for me to be grabbed immediately by anything, like just immediately. That was really impressive. And as it went on, I was like, oh, this really feels like a story. So you said you've been working on this for a long time. I can absolutely tell. And I mean that in the best way, because it really does feel like, honestly, very real. I was like, this is in really not just good shape, but like this feels like a real story that like I could pick up from a bookstore and have it be, kind of set and solid. And also just to make clear that way I don't say anything wrong, is this in some sort of post-apocalyptic fantasy-ish but realistic realm?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So I picked up on that and I was like, Yas Queen, I love that stuff. I love that Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, Wizards, Ralph Baksh's Wizards, Adventure Time shtick. So I thought that was really cool. And the other thing, though, to this end, a serious compliment is when I was a preteen, I want to say it was a preteen, because around then I loved the Starship Troopers cartoon. There is a deep cut right there, but anyway. And there's a lot of military science fiction. You have more Starship Troopers, Battlestar Galactica, Otter Harrington, the list goes on. But I remember thinking, why isn't there military fantasy? Because I thought that was really interesting, because you have all these stories about, armies and fantasy stories. Why isn't there something like that? And reading this, I was like, someone did that. Someone did that sort of thing. And I thought that was really pretty freaking impressive and really exciting. And I was like, oh yeah. And I liked Paige, and I mean, probably this is because we reviewed it for an episode of is it Let's Talk Stories? Let's Talk Stories.
Yes,
Sorry.
that one.
I've been teaching children all day. I know I say that like every episode. It's like, oh, he's bringing up the job.
No, it's a
but
very exhausting job. My wife is.
Yes, you have.
Yeah, my wife is a teacher.
Yeah,
You have
it's
someone here who understands for sure.
yeah, it's exhausting. Thank you. You get it. I liked that material, but it felt like A Few Good Men, like something like that. And I was like, man, that's really interesting.
I was gonna say that. I was gonna
Yeah.
say like it's a mix between A Few Good Men and some like literary nonlinear fantasy story.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting. And I liked the characters, and I liked the dialogue. And again, it all felt very, very, very confident. I would say it felt like one of the more completely understood texts that we've studied. Not as an offense to any of the other texts, but it's like this felt like it was more down the road of development. And again, having you worked on it, and the other thing was just I enjoyed it. Like I wanted to know, was like, okay, what is this? Where is this going? What is the desertion? What is the traitor? And having a military society, I was like, this is really interesting. And then there's a Jeep. And I love that drop. I was like, oh, there's a Jeep. Wait a second. Okay, so what exactly is this? And having that sort of revealed was really intriguing. And it just really worked for me in terms of like it felt interesting and different than usual types of these. If the description that Jaylon sent is working in my head, science fiction fantasy sort of shtick. And I was like, yeah, I want to know what exactly is going on. So it was it was intriguing, but also it was pretty fast to read. And it was, I went through the pages and I was like, oh, yes. And that's really impressive. So a lot of the notes that I had really, they are technical, and I will specify this too. I feel like I am a bit of a broken record when I do say technical, but the technical, it's like, you can say I have the fastest car in the world, the coolest car, but if the pieces, and you can have the concept of the fastest car, but if you don't have the engine parts or a driver or anything, then you're failing in your F1 race. So that's why I emphasize the technical stuff, but more than the technical stuff, there's other details. But I say that in the sense of it, it felt kind of two-faced of like, okay, now here is the darker side that I need to comment on to resolve. But I say that because the good side of it, the other side of it, it, it kind of seemed really full of creativity and character and solid drama and intrigue and good writing. Like, there was a solid, very literary, but very accessible, very like professional, very sharp tone to the writing. So that's why I say like this stuff was very evident, and I made a lot of notes of it because again, the other side was so clear. So if we can just have the two phases match, which is very easy to do. It's very possible, pretty done, pretty solid right there. So I enjoyed it. I wanted to see like what the heck was what.
No, I'm honestly a biggest compliment to say that it stands out in the sci-fi world because a lot of that is so much like this. It's hard to stand out in a sci-fi world.
Yeah, definitely. It can start to feel like whatever you're writing, the story has already been told before because there are so many stories. Something that we always say here, though, is sure, the story may have been told before, but not by you. And that's why we emphasize so much the individual voice of the writers and making that be the part that shines through maybe some plot devices or set pieces that people may have seen before.
I was gonna add a suggestion to that too, because I was just thinking about this the other day. With my project that I've spent this April will be 11 years on. It's a space opera called Cosmos. And that I deliberately made that a very, not standard, but very, you can pick up, Star Wars, kind of Star Trek-y, Guardians of the Galaxy kind of, universe, planets and ships. And there's no such thing as radiation in space or any of that hardcore science fiction stuff, pretty obvious. But I think in developing that story, I think, and I've seen this with other stories too, so it's not just me. I think the way you can make your world stand out is its people. So you can have a bunch of people who are into like they can be nautical people on a planet filled with water. That's great, but you can make them sing particular types of songs. You can make them all into video games. You can have them have an entire, Olympics of video games, every 4 years because they found under the sea 100 years ago a PlayStation 2, for the equivalent. And suddenly, this nautical people we've seen in the second Pendragon book from DJ McHale, or semi recently the James Cameron Way of Water thingamajig, the Avatar. I call it a different name, not a mean name, just I call it a different name. So I was like, oh no one would get that reference. But yeah, we've seen water people before, right? But if you can make the people themselves individual people that you invented, I think that starts to shape it, which is again the military society aspect of this. I was like, oh, military state and post empire, that's very interesting. So I think if as long as you make the people feel like your people, I think you can put it in any kind of standard science fiction fantasy coat, as long as the people are meaningful to you.
Yes. As far as my list of what's working, I will repeat a lot of what Charles said, but going maybe even a little deeper on some of the things. And I did make a couple notes I did highlight a couple places where I saw a line that really stuck out at me. But just to start out with, this entire opening hit really hard. It felt visceral. It felt like a feeling that we could enter into. So we were just smacked right into the middle of the action, and it gripped us by the throat and said, pay attention, there's something important going on. And I think that that's a super strong opening. The opening is the hardest and most important part of your book. I think I struggle with openings. A lot of people I know struggle with openings, but you nailed it here. So great job. Again, like Charles said, the story in general was really, really good. The setting, the character motivation, the genre, it all felt very unique, compelling, and exciting, which is, again, hit it out of the park. Hit it out of the park there. That was really good. And specifically talking about the world building and what specifically made that work. Again, like the world just felt like it was gritty enough that I could touch it. It was tangible, but it was also fantastic enough that it sparked my imagination and brought me out of the monotony of our tangible lives. So that balance that you hit, I think, is what made your world building really great. And I especially say with the military side of it, I speak from experience because my husband is active duty. So I've lived in the military world for a while, and I can tell that this vibe that you shared here was very realistic. There was enough believability about your world that it made it easy to believe in because there was so much that was familiar and real and like would fact check. And then it was also enough new things that made it interesting. So like, for example, you mentioned there was a name day instead of a birthday. And that's something that like, it's a little world building detail that you don't have to explain, but it's just obvious and it's new. And so it makes your world interesting. And that's exactly how you world build. That's exactly how you create a world that your audience will love to fall into and get lost in and then become a fan of, but also make it believable so it feels real. So yeah, great job there. Scrolling down just to find some of the lines that I really liked. Her hazel eyes contrasted with the bruises beneath them. This was a really great example of how to put a ton of information into one concise sentence. Again, character descriptions are hard. A lot of people have a hard time figuring out how to best describe their characters without sounding like info dumping, but this was a really great way to explain both how she looks, how she feels, and what she may have been recently experiencing. So that's just one example of a sentence that showed your technical talent. Another one was that was why she was enlisting. She needed to know her parents, needed to know the lives they led. And this was a really great, this is the first time where I saw there's some really good character motivation there. There's a character's want that's going to drive the conflict that I can get behind, and I'm going to be rooting for this character. I'm going to immediately understand and sympathize with Paige, and that's going to make me want to keep reading the story. So there were a lot of other points in here where we saw some really good character motivation just be pushed out to the front, and that's a great technique for making sure that your readers stay interested. That's strong story structure there. So well done with that. And then this one, the prison cell was not unlike the cargo ship. We'll go into this a little bit more, but in general, you did a good job setting up some of these flashback scenes by connecting those details from the past narration into the present narration. So you
I'm
connect
glad to
them
hear
well
that.
in this. Yeah.
Like some of these were like the like tried openers, like the flashbacks and like attempted openers. So like this combination was not something that like they were originally together. They were pulled together. So I'm glad to hear that they're working more or less.
Gotcha. Again, we will go into it more a little bit because I think that it's in both of our notes that Charles and I want to help brainstorm even some better ways to position the
I'm sure there
flashbacks.
are plenty of ways.
But in general, the foundation is there. The way that you connect a detail from the past narration into a detail of the present narration is the way to go. That's the best way to set it up. It makes sense, and the reader can follow it logically, which makes the writing flow even if the timeline is jumping around. This is, again, character motivation, just really solid motivation that makes us feel like we can jump right into your main character's emotional state, which is a good note toward the depth that you're writing from, which is something that you specifically said you wanted to make sure this story had, was that depth of feeling. And it's definitely there. I can see it in your character motivation. I can see it in some of these lines where it just feels alive. It feels real. It feels like something that we can enter into because we've experienced that feeling before. We know exactly what that feeling tastes like, feels like sitting in our gut. And that's exactly what makes your characters relatable. That's what makes people want to read about them and root for them and keep turning pages. So great job there. I think that wraps up all of my notes. Do you have any thoughts before we move on to what could use some more work to be even stronger?
No, I appreciate all of the notes so far. Just enjoy listening.
Awesome. All right. Well, now we'll go into the dun 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 of like the what's not working.
I've been in plenty of my undergrad set me up for this in terms of like the writer's room. I've been there. I've been not allowed to say anything while people are talking about my work is pretty much what like our undergrad set us up with is just kind of listening, which was very difficult, but it was an important lesson to learn. I'll give it that.
That's a hard lesson. Man, that is hard because that's so opposite of how we like to edit here because we want to know from the writer exactly what they're trying to get across. And if
Right.
we're making our notes based on false assumptions, we want you to correct us and like give us more information to work with. So yeah, definitely feel free to interrupt us whenever during this session and set us straight if we start getting anything off your trajectory of where you want to go with this. All right, well, Charles, I will let you take it away then with what could be improved to be even stronger.
Yeah, so for me, I will say this is entirely a me thing, a me thing. So you don't have to take this too seriously, but I personally am not a fan of stories where the characters are walking and they have a flashback. It's like that's why a lot of modern prestige television drives me nuts, where it's like, I'm an adult story and I can go and have a flashback episode 5 times. It's like, stop it. But that's just me. And this was fine. The only thing I will say, I think the page break slash transitions need to be much clearer. That's kind of a prose detail, but mostly a technical thing. Uh numerous very easy fixes, but numerous technical details. We have indenting, some character, some sentence details that I recommend. Again, for me, this was because of one of my mentors in college, very picky about it. Had been a long time since he'd been. I recommend avoiding the vague it and contractions. So that's, little details like that. There's a lot of them. They're all very easy fixes. I'm not going to focus on that too much because, again, that's line editing. But mostly make sure the paragraphs are indented properly. I do recommend page breaks a little bit more clearly, at the very least, between flashback, present, and such. You might want to emphasize, and I think you did do this, but you might want to emphasize in that sense. I was going to say the past tense, but I think you do that already. But yeah, I recommend the switching between the material to be a little bit clearer. I think a lot of people would disagree with me, so this is okay. I would say, how do you do this and still satisfy my dislike of that style? Would be chapter 1, present, chapter 2, flashback, chapter 3, present, chapter 4, flashback, that kind of thing between the chapters. But that's a me thing again. Just making sure that the transition's a little clearer because I did get confused sometimes.
Even
But
if this chapter break is just like on a page break instead of in line there.
yeah.
Right.
Um
I can see that.
and of course what I said about the vague it and contractions. The thing so about the vague it, because I feel like everyone goes, why is he getting mad about the vague it? Because it's not because my mentor, like, capstone traumatized me into avoiding the vague it like the plague. But it's something I learned from him is you can make stronger sentences without the it. So, for example, it had been a long time since he'd been in a courtroom himself. You can say the courtroom had become a stranger to him since he had retired, since retiring to become a
I see what you're
professor
getting
of
at.
law. That's why I recommend avoiding the vague it. The contractions, that's just for professionalism because usually prose stuff doesn't have contractions. So that's just a minor detail. But that's why I say the it for the sentences. To this end, the main detail I noticed with this, and I know, Jaylon, you talked about this. Okay, let's talk before we get to character stuff. Let's talk world stuff. So, for example, I recommended on page 2. So it says, wage war against the military state of Magnus. And I had the thought, I said, first of all, I love the idea of a military state in this world. That's such a good idea and that's so interesting. I've never seen that before. So I want to see more of that. Good work there. But I was thinking, no government has ever officially been called the military state. So technically, they were the National Socialist Party of Germany. They were not the evil Third Reich or the Nazis. It's the same thing. The People's Republic of China. I forget
I
what the
think it's
U.S.
interesting that you put a negative connotation around military state, but it's fair. My goal is a military state as in like this is post-apocalyptic, like protective more or less in the
Mhm.
term of what, but I can see how you can like gauge that as like as a negative connotation around.
Yeah. So I guess in general, it was the idea that also, so if you wanted to make it more neutral, you could also call it, let's see, even just the state, because I think let's say there are other nations around in this post-apocalyptic world, they would recognize Magnus equals military. They wouldn't have to say it specifically. But that's a creative thing. But to this end, the one detail I noticed with the sentence. Now, the sentences are good ones. This is just a polishing for the reading tone, and I'm trying to find. I'm actually going to stick with this one for a moment. But like, for example, how do I put this? Okay, so this sounds, especially because you said post grad work, so I'm trying not to like whatever. But for me, I felt too many sentences were more showy than telly. Now, if you know the writing thing, you know about the show and tell thing. I'm not gonna do that. But you did say that this had
This
been
is
sitting.
literally that is a critique I've gotten on every single piece of work that I've ever had in my entire life.
Yeah.
Is that it's all show, no tell, which is actually kind of my preferred way of writing in general,
Mhm.
stylistically. I think that I do accept that that is kind of just who I am as a writer, is
Yeah.
a very, I'm also autistic, so I feel things outside of my, everything is just like viewing to me
Yeah.
in some ways. So
Hmm.
I think that that's very much like the where I stick to it is like in a very like almost like you're watching a TV show is what I've also been told it's kind of like is very much like you are seeing it, not like feeling it, I guess.
Mm.
But
Hmm.
anywho,
So what
And
you're
that's
saying is you would be an amazing screenwriter.
I've heard that, but I've tried screenwriting and it is very difficult. I don't really like
Fair enough.
I do like the community of it though. I like the like writer's room concept of like going together and doing it.
Mhm.
But I'm not super great at screenwriting technically.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. It's
So this
not
what's is interesting too is that like we opened before our podcast talking about X-Men and Star Wars briefly, right? The thing is, if you read some of the Star Wars novels, like say the masterful, golly, what a great book, Revenge of the Sith novelization, there's that kind of writing. They'll just be like characters will just go on these inner monologues that they're not inner monologues per se. They're the writer, Matthew Strover, I believe, wrote that book. But another writer of that era of Star Wars books was James Luceno. And he does the same thing. He'll write, a bunch of these character bits and it just goes on and on and on. So again, we mentioned Honor Harrington. Honor Harrington, oh my gosh, my sister's a huge fan of these books. And sometimes she's like, I love these books, but sometimes they just get super, super technical. And da, 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 da. So here's what I'm saying. You're totally okay with doing that. Because a lot of people will go like, no, everything needs to be a style. There needs to be a style. And it's like, yeah, Charlotte Bronte didn't do that with Jane Eyre. So you don't have to do a specific style. Her, here's the kick, is it's not the story. The story's fine. It's the way it must be presented. So, for example, I'm on page 4. So, Paige looked down at a tattoo on her forearm, at a memorial tattoo she'd gotten from her mother. So, I recommended this kind of change. Paige looked down at her forearm, and the memorial tattoo etched there, thinking of her mother. Now, so basically what I'm saying is you can have that description television sentence all you want, live long day, knock yourself out. But I think the word choice can really, and kind of reorganizing some of the flow and the patterning of it can add to that emotion. So you can eat your cake and have it too. And again, I'm trying to find the note that Jaylon and Bible. So we're talking about her dad, right? But logically, she knew he wouldn't. He'd been killed in action just a month before. So in this case, okay, here's a great detail. I don't have him on me
I
right
think that
now.
paragraph is so convoluted.
Okay, well, let's look at that. So it was still hard to grasp that her father was just gone. She almost expected him to meet her at the dock when they arrived at Fort Groves, but logically, she knew he wouldn't. He'd been killed in action just a month before. So here's the information. She still can't believe her dad is dead. She keeps thinking he's going to be at the dock, Fort Groves, that's where we're headed, but he's not. He just died, killed in action. That's it. So all you need to do, you can do whatever you want. Those are the 3 points we're going to get across. But the thing is, when you say he'd been killed in action just a month before, this is, and I think I've been building for this for ages, but I've been using playing cards, trading cards as some of an incentives for my students. So this pattern is my brain is that right there. He'd been killed in action just a month before. That is a very trading card kind of description where you got to get to the nitty gritty. 5 seconds, go. Great for trading cards, but it's not very fun. It's not very piercing of the heart with the text. Hence why I recommended, but logically, she knew he would never be there because it's kind of the present tense. He would always stay in his month-old grave. Now, month-old, I kind of threw this out there and I was like, no, month-old is terrible wording. But the idea is that basically you're playing with the audience. And I don't know if other writers agree with this, but for me, I feel part of the fun of reading and part of the fun of writing is you're having a game with the audience. It's like you're Mary Poppins or something, getting the readers to play these little games and they don't even know what they're cleaning their room because really you've played a game with them. And so to that end, he'd been killed in action just a month before. The reader would just go, oh, right. But if you make it kind of emotional, like, how does Paige feel about that? It's like it's never ending. That's how she feels. Let's say, for example, you can say whatever however she feels, but I imagined, let's say she feels that way, right? And the reader goes, shoot, he did. And they go, oh, okay. Now there's something there. You're revealing it. It's kind of like, like your Rod Serling. I'm dropping a lot of references today. I don't know why. And Rod Serling, and it's like, yes. And she thought he would be there, but he wouldn't because he was dead. And
Yeah,
so,
it's like screenwriting. It's like he'd been killed in action just a month before.
yeah,
Beat.
yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
so there you go. So again, the information's fine, but I think if you look at the word choice and how the patterning of it, or the word pattern, the sense pattern, it can be a little bit more emotive. So Jaylon, while we're on this topic, I think you should share your note on the topic while we're on this subject.
Well, my other suggestion here, because again, like Charles said, there's a lot of different ways to play with it. I just threw out another option to play with it that keeps it concise but still emotional, is she kept having to remind herself that killed in action meant he wouldn't be meeting her at the dock when she arrived in Fort Groves. The biggest thing is when you're narrating, you're not narrating as a dispassionate narrator. You are narrating as if you are Paige herself. So kind of taking yourself out of just giving the information in a dispassionate way and giving us the information through Paige's perspective of it, if
Right.
that makes
Through her
sense.
mind.
Yeah. So
And
that's the general rule that we're getting at here.
and also to that end, it's like, so what option would you pick, for example? Well, in this case, like let's say you had to pick between the two options, right? You don't. You can make up one. But it's how would you feel about that? And then you also not contrast, blend it with how would the character feel? Because how you feel about it is how it's going to be written, and then how Paige would feel about it is what you are going to write about that moment. So that was the main crux of other details. Again, there's a lot of I'm going through the list here. There is a lot of technical issues, and again, they're all line edits. Just indent, void the vigate, void contractions, a couple typos. Again, very very simple stuff. But mainly, I do recommend what we talked about. And it sounds like you kind of know what you're going for. Is change up the patterning of the sentences and the word choice to try to emphasize that emotion. One little detail too, and again, I think this is kind of a me thing, but I still recommend it because I think it's not entirely a me thing, is by tomorrow she arrive in the capital city Hollis to a new cell. So here's the thing. For me, whenever I read something like that, it makes me feel like, Jesus, more world building. Okay, so the capital city is Hollis. Okay, got it. So maybe what you could say is I recommend they would still be on her wrist when she arrived in Hollis City. By tomorrow, she would arrive. Oh, see, I said arrive. She would be in the capital in a new cell. That would actually be much better. Let me edit that
Right.
for just a
Just
moment. What?
differentiating so it's not all together in one
Yeah.
fail swoop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. Precisely. Yeah. But to this end, though, again, we're still playing with the reader where it's like Hollis City. Where's Hollis? What's Hollis City? Oh, the capital. Ooh. And if you can keep kind of, like a street performer, if you can keep them entertained like that, they'll follow where you go. And again, that's when the science world becomes different. Because the thing is, every single reader, even if they're inexperienced, they know that, the capital of Gondor is Minas Tirith, and they know that Wookiees exist, and they know
Yeah.
The planet
They
Volk.
all I knew that.
Every single
Yeah,
one.
every
I was gonna be like, I'm not cool enough for this.
Okay, yeah. But in the back of their head, they know that stuff. So what you need to do is tell them, yeah, this is the capital city, but this is my capital city. And how you can do that is not treat it like it's bam, new. No one's ever seen a new capital city. You would go, no one's ever seen my city. So it's not a capital. Because no one calls, okay, they do technically call it the capital on the news. Right. On the news, they'll say Washington, D.C., they're in the capital today. But everyone commonly will call it Washington or
Right. Or
D.C.
DC.
So that's what you want to, that's why I say call it Hollis City, like New York City. And then you can tell them it's a capital. And that's how you can kind of show this world a little bit more naturally, a little bit more organically. I don't know if that's the exact same thing, but I'm going to make a slight distinction and be able
I've
to
always
introduce
wanted to
that.
see the Emerald City.
Yeah, there you go. And you're like, what's the Emerald City? Yeah, precisely. You don't need to know that the Emerald City is the capital of Oz by being told it's the capital. Frickin' know it because the way people are talking about it. And then you see the darn thing. You're like, oh, okay. This is very, very, very implicit in Gregory Maguire's Wicked books. So, like I said, I'm full of references today. I am so sorry. But
No, you're good. I know
This is
half of
great.
them.
There's
I'm
such a
trying.
treasure
I wrote
trove.
down some of them.
I
There is
apologize.
such a treasure trove here of like we're gonna connect with someone with this episode.
Um, So yeah, that's mainly the kick of it because the rest of it worked. Like you got this cheap scene, a lot of it works. It's good. I just think again, if you said that the people have said this before, emotive writing, you can do that. But again, you can stay with your style, just shift up the word choice because
No,
it
I think it'll
works. It
make
does
it
work.
more of an impact when
More
those
press.
shifts happen, is when
Yeah,
those feelings come out. It just
yeah,
makes the show, and then that just hit, right? Like
yeah,
it's like here's
Yeah.
everything, and then like here's the feeling, and
yeah.
that's just more of an impact because it's rarer to see from me.
And by the way, I knew you would pick up on them, be able to respond like that based on the text. Hence why I was saying about like, the good and what needs fixing. I could tell that you could figure that out. So another compliment to you. But yeah, that's mainly it. Other than that, a lot of it was like try to cut this word, be a little less repetitious. If you cut this word, be a little more impactful, changes it to something else, yada yada yada. Stuff that's in the text that you'll see. So there we go.
To
Unless there are any questions or anything.
I was gonna
Not so
say, if
far.
this helps at all, I'm jumping in, kind of piggybacking off of what you said, Charles, and seeing if I can explain it in an even clearer way for someone who can't follow the references. What you're saying with like everyone knows that the Emerald City is the capital. Even if they don't know it, they know it. What you're really getting at is when you're writing, the way that you give information to avoid info dumping or narrating in a dispassionate and removed sense is you're telling the story as if you're assuming that the reader knows more and does or can figure it out and doesn't need to be told explicitly. And so when you do that, when you mention the capital as if the reader just will figure out that it's the capital, now you're like kind of giving a clue for the reader to follow, and you're making that breadcrumb of clues that keeps the reader engaged while they're reading, so they're not just absorbing information like it's a textbook. They're absorbing information while actively thinking through it and having to fit puzzle pieces together. So it's giving the reader that credit that like they're smart enough to figure out connotation of your narration. And they
My trust of
also,
the reader goes.
yes, Yeah, exactly. It's like, I think we said this on a previous episode too, where like readers are really smart, but they're also really dumb. So it's hard to know exactly when to trust them or not. But yeah, just narrating as if you are your character and your character is telling their narration from their perspective. And in their perspective, they're not going to narrate a story and necessarily have to specify explicitly this
Right.
is
All
Hollis
these
City, the
people will know
capital
this.
city.
Whoever
Yeah,
I'm talking to will already know this.
exactly. So if you think of it, it's like it's more of your main character's trust in their readers, their listeners to the telling of this story. So yeah, if that helps. Am I on the right track there, Charles, of what you were trying to say?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's and when I say everyone, it's basically again, everyone's got an imagination, so they're like they can imagine that stuff. So you just got to go, yeah, that's what we're playing with, and like go. So in that sense, I would say in terms of are readers smarter or are they more dumb? I think readers are kids because kids will pick up
Mm.
amazing things, but sometimes they're just like, get it. So
Yeah.
sometimes you gotta shake them by the collar, shirt of the collar, and go, ah. But a lot of times the kids will get it because they intrinsically understand good, evil. Maybe this is kind of whack, that middle brown gray stuff that you mentioned in the description of the story.
Yep. All right. Well, I'll jump in then with my list of things. Again, the clearer designation in timeline hops. I want to specify, I really love this style and your unique writing style. There's going to be a lot of I say this nicely, but also like it's a thing. I've been working in the writing industry for a while and I've seen these play out in very toxic ways. But there are very educated writers and English majors who will tell you that there is a right way to write. And really, there's not. Like, the second that you're trying to sound like someone else, you stop sounding like yourself. And the power of your story comes from it being yours, it being your voice, your truth, your style. And especially if we're talking about like there's so many stories nowadays, and how can you make yourself stand out from just the next book on the shelf? It's leaning into what you have to uniquely bring to the table that no one else can bring. And that's your voice, that's your lived experience, that's your emotional truth. That's the way that you have experienced life, and now you're inviting other people into sharing that experience with you in a whole new world. So I really love the specific style that you have here of it being a non-linear kind of literary time jumping style. And also the very specific style of your sentences is very solid. I saw it stand out. And again, some of the more specific sentences that I made notes on, well, I'll get into that later. First, just focus on this point. Narration and flashbacks, and where is the action actually happening? Is it happening in the past or happening presently? You can play around with different ways to just make that more clear, but I also want to encourage you that like this is a fun from my perspective. This is a me thing. This is where we get into the subjective part of art, and it's really fun. But I appreciate that. I think that we actually had a whole article that we wrote for our newsletter that was talking about how nonlinear timelines can make your story pack a bigger emotional punch and kind of underscore the theme of your story better. So, all that being said, like, yes, there's some things that still need to be a little bit clearer so that your reader doesn't get confused and give up reading because they think it's not worth the effort to follow what's actually happening when. But in general, I like the way that you have it. I like that you included that. And I think that it can work to make your story even stronger than if it was just a linear timeline.
I have played with it in multiple different ways. I've done complete breaks where I like state where they are, what year it is, to like make sure that like it's like very clear, which I was back and forth on whether or not I really liked it. I'm always a fan of nonlinear stories, big fan of the last 5 years, big fan of things that are not in order. But I also really like time and generalize like the idea of time and how time works. And I've also been playing a lot with like I kind of really want to follow in Diana Gall something. Outlander, the series. Her writing is very much like that, where it's like she has like whole times where like she's telling the story from some like another character's perspective. It's like her partner telling her a story about what he did and is able to like go into like a bit of a narrative about it, but honing that skill is difficult.
Yeah, I hear you. You're doing better than I would be because I haven't actually written in this style before. I've just edited for it. But I also enjoy reading in it. I loved reading All the Light We Cannot See. that is a nonlinear story. And the article that we wrote, or Jared wrote, it was based off of Station 11. So those are all like really powerful stories. You can use this literary technique really powerfully. Again, maybe it's just as simple as putting in those chapter breaks in a new line. Some of these problems have ridiculously simple solutions, and you don't have to overthink it.
I often find I am overthinking it.
We are, as writers, we are very good at overthinking. That's why we need to have an outside perspective and fresh eyes on what we're writing, because we can get so close to it and it's so much a part of our hearts that it's hard to take a step back and be like, okay, I can stop overthinking about this and not getting anywhere. I can just stop spiraling. So that is exactly why editors are here. That's our job. We exist to help people who get stuck in overthinking stop overthinking. So, and it's funny because we say that as editors who are also writers and know exactly how it feels to get stuck in the overthinking. For a lot of my individual notes, it had to do with, you specifically said that you wanted to make sure that the depth and emotion came through in your characters and in the story. So I wanted to speak to that specific question and say the feeling comes across well in a lot of your sentences. And if you want to make your sentences even more consistently strong in carrying that depth, you can layer your information. So in every sentence, you have the explicit information that you're trying to convey, and then you have the implicit information that you're trying to convey. This kind of goes along with what we're saying, where you have the bullet point of information that needs to be told that moves the plot forward. But then you also have the flip side, the dynamic where Paige is the one narrating it. So we're experiencing this through how she feels about it. So some of the examples that I have to find. Okay, here we go. Here's a good one. Sergeant Bell had grown up next door to Professor Porter and had been friends with his son, Elias. So that's good information. That's the information that needs to be conveyed in order to get the story told. But it's all explicit information. If you add a layer of implicit information in this sentence, you get a certain tone that comes across that tells us information about the kind of relationship that Sergeant Bell has with Professor Porter and Elias. Is Professor Porter the only one who's supporting her because he feels obligated, because he knows her? Does she feel okay? So like you yeah, like that's perfect. You add just, it can even be like 2 words. Like, but Sergeant Bell had grown up to Professor Porter and had been friends with his son Elias, so he felt obligated, or he had to save face, or whatever it is. Like, just convey that in just as few words as possible, and now you have an even more layered sentence that conveys more information than just the explicit information that needs to be told. Um, and again, it gives the readers more clues to keep them interested, keep them putting puzzle pieces together, keep them engaged in wanting to turn pages, which in general, your writing is already really good at doing. So I made some notes on some specific sentences like this. This one in particular, I was stuck on this one because I was thinking about, I was like, this seems like on some of your other descriptions, there's so much unique flavor to it that it made me excited. And this one felt a little bit more generic and a little bit disconnected from where we last left Sergeant Bell with how she was mentally doing in being present. So I was just asking a clarifying question. Was she daydreaming out of the present reality, or was she watching reality unfold as if through a haze? And is there a better way to say this that doesn't feel generic, but feels very specific to her unique experience here? And again, like any examples that I gave, it's just a starting point. You can use it, you can totally rewrite it, you can say, no, it's good the way it is. And that's totally fine. And okay, this is a very technical thing, but anyone watching may find this interesting. When you have a paragraph with dialogue, the paragraph, what's included in that paragraph should only be about the person that is saying the dialogue. So this dialogue, this isn't a dialogue tag here. This is a separate sentence, a separate clause that has to do with someone who is not the speaker.
I've had to
So
do a
you,
lot of unlearning on how to write dialogue because I've done so many things like that where like I had a lot of relearning as far as dialogue goes. I've made some pretty big steps in the right direction, but I see what you mean. It's just not
Nice.
about it's she's supposed to stand, but like it's not her talking. So it can't be
Yes,
her start of the sentence because she's not the one talking. It would be Judge Myers, whatever Judge Myers had to say is
exactly. You get it. You know. Yeah. Uh, I would say either just take this short sentence out or give it its own paragraph so that we can follow what Paige is doing. But yeah, that's a very technical thing. More just fun note if you're watching. This is the kind of stuff that us editors have to worry about, and you don't have to worry about as you're writing. Your job is just to get the information onto the page, and then the editors worry about all the technical details that people will nitpick. So no worries there. And oh, this is another one that I was really interested. I was trying to problem solve because I was thinking, like, when I read this paragraph, it felt like we gave information twice, and the very first sentence confused me a little bit because I wasn't sure what it was saying. So there's two ways to fix it that I thought of, but there's obviously more ways. But I wondered if a better option for fixing this first sentence would be to just take your sentence down here. On arrival, she would pledge herself to the medical corps service and uphold her mother's legacy. Start the paragraph with that, and then talk about how that piece of information is informing the next sentence of Paige hoped that following in her mother's footsteps would be enough for her grandmother to forgive her for enlisting. Or you can just edit that first sentence to give more
include it.
information up front. Yeah. Paige hoped that still technically honoring her generational career of healing would be enough for her grandmother to forgive her for enlisting. So yeah, different ways of how to fix this, but this is just another like really small technical note of the information given was really good. Maybe just organize it differently so that it hits in the way that it's supposed to hit, with the cadence it's supposed to hit. That wraps it up for me. A lot of it was just reiterating what Charles was saying here of just taking the good bones that you have and the very, very tiny, like technical details of beefing up your sentences with more layered information and then making that information always come from the perspective of your protagonist. Um, but that's the general thing. And all of these edits are very small, very like line editing details. Already this story is really, really strong. And that's a good segue into our last part of these story audit sessions. We like to talk specifically about the theme of your story. I believe that all stories are built on theme, and theme is what ties every element together to make a strong story. So we want to take a moment to just talk about what the theme of your story is, what your purpose is for telling it, what the message is that you're trying to convey. Or a better way of saying that is just what you want to leave your reader feeling. So usually what we do, because your story becomes alive once you share it. And so the theme that you initially write it with might be different from the theme that Charles reads it from, with the viewpoint of his lived experience, and I read it from the viewpoint of my lived experiences. So that's kind of the magic of story, is it takes on a different life for every reader. So we just like to kind of go through, we'll hear from you what you wanted the theme to be, and then Charles and I will just share what we picked up even from these first few chapters and see if it lines up with what you were going for.
Really great question. What is my theme? I would say it's morally gray areas and those places still being in a morally gray area does not mean that there's not growth.
Mm,
Is probably somewhere where it really lays is that I feel like we're in a lot of dichotomy in the government as of right now, a lot of like separate spaces that are just complete boxes, whereas I think that there's more overlap than we realize. And realizing that just makes you understand and accept that people grow at their own rate and in different ways. So they may seem like they're completely on the opposite side of you, but they're in reality just experience like making small steps towards that is the message really is that like there are small steps that turn into big strides.
I appreciate that. Charles, what were your thoughts?
I could definitely see that within the selection that we had. I really thought, tying it back to Few Good Men, it was kind of like the truth of finding out the truth, because I wanted to know, like, what is the truth of why this prosecution is happening at all, which can involve that morally gray area material that you mentioned. as well as, I mean, we have, if I was reading this correctly, because sometimes I misinterpret things and such, we have Papa over here saying something about like, the truth of things and could stop war, which by the way reminded me of Attack on Titan early chapters, which is pretty good. That's a compliment coming from me. I thought that was really, that's kind of what it was like trying to find out what is really the truth, but like you said, also the elements in that truth, because something I did pick up going back to about, military not being pure evil of a state in this context, that no one was being especially cruel to her. So it's like, okay, if they're not, pure evil, do they have a point? Did she really do this? Sort of element of gray within that truth is something I did also pick up in that
Mm.
in
I like
person.
that.
Yeah. I like that you specifically mentioned truth because that's a even more concise way of saying what I was trying to say, but I put a lot more words to it when I was thinking through it this afternoon. But I also saw heritage being a big part, especially in these opening chapters, the stories that make us impact our story. Um, I think that I mean, that's a truth that comes through in most books and movies, but I saw it especially here. How important is heritage to the choices we make? And where is it worth sacrificing it all or crossing the lines to honor your need to know your past? Where does our history intersect with our present? How do the choices of our parents affect our own choices? These are all questions that in reading this sample, it brought up for me. And I think that these conversations that stories start are exactly why we need people like you, Aspen, writing your stories and sharing them with the world, because it's those conversation starters that are going to help us take a look at ourselves, take a look at our beliefs and our worldviews, and ask the hard questions that we need to ask in order to fix our perspective where, maybe it's been skewed by narratives that we've been told instead of truths that we've actually experienced, or maybe our own pain of our own truth has skewed our perspective. So now we can't accept someone else's lived experience as truth. And these are all things that I saw really come through in this story. And I think that it just speaks to how important of a story it is for you to share with the world, because there's someone out there who needs to hear this story. There's someone out there who needs that healing of walking through Paige's story in order to help them understand their own. And I just really appreciate that you are getting it written, even though it was on the back burner for a long time, because someone out there needs it. And I think that's why we talk so much about theme, because the theme really does relate to your why. Why is it that you're going through all this work of, telling the story that is so emotionally intense and takes so much skill? And writing is just a really hard journey. Writing a story is not as easy as people make it seem. And
Everyone wants
you
to write a
meet
book. I don't know very
exactly.
many people that do it.
And no one understands until they're actually doing it how difficult it really is. It takes a strong why to help you see it through all the way to the end. So I believe that I saw your strong why both in this sample that we got to read and also in talking with you and hearing about your story and what led you to write this book. So thank you again very much for sharing with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for all of your notes. Honestly, it's been very honest, truthful. I see exactly what you're talking about. I appreciate pointing it out, like physically, to help me kind of see where it is. I also appreciate the line edits for sure. I always know I need them. I'm not an editor, and I will not ever be. Kudos to you.
I am not an editor for my own work. I always need someone else to look at it. I think it's kind of impossible to edit your own work.
Yeah, for sure. It gets too involved for sure. And I have like 7, 8 drafts of the story more or less, and 400 pages of the story really that exist. But this is like the latest version of it. And I'm glad that so many of the things that like have compiled, I guess, from draft to draft still come through, which is, I guess, my biggest worry. Like, I feel like I've taken a lot of break from this because I feel like there's like now I have so much that I don't know how to like make it into one story or make it feel like it's all conclusive and like
Mhm.
it is one wrapped narrative. So I've been doing a lot of studying on kind of new ways that I'm reinventing, and I think I'm leaning more of in a fantasy realm as I'm coming through like the newest drafts and stuff. I think this is great stuff and actually gave me a lot of inspiration. It made me feel like I was actually like doing something. So I appreciate that.
Awesome.
It's
That's
hard when you don't
exactly.
have a lot of people. I don't have a lot of like readers in my life so
Yeah.
much, that, and even people who do read it, like readers are just like, oh, it's good. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
You need, I need more than that, which is a lot of what like any reader that you ask, they'll be like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. I like it. I'm interested. And I'm like, okay, that's nice to know, but it's not
Super
helpful.
helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I appreciate, seriously, it's been really great to get to talk to you guys and hear what you guys had to say for sure.
Awesome. It was an honor. That's exactly why we're here. For anyone listening, if you need someone who is willing to beat up your story and actually tell you the truth about it, please submit your stories to Let's Fix Stories. We'd love to do an editing session with you and hear about the story that you're telling as well. Or if you also listened to this and found some clarity for your own writing, let us know in the comments. So yeah, thank you again so much everyone for joining us. And Aspen, real quick, do you want to let the audience know where they can find you and follow your writing?
You can follow me on TikTok. You can add me on TikTok, but I don't exactly post so much. Not much of a TikToker myself. But you're more than
Fair
welcome
enough.
to message me. I'm happy to be from friends.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, if you want to make a new friend and chat with Aspen about writing stories and then maybe see uh, what comes out in the future from this story, because I'm hoping that we're going to get to see the story published one day, then definitely we'll leave the link down below.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time and
Of
spending
course.
time reading people's stories and doing it for free, honestly, because that's also something that is very difficult, and you don't get paid to be a writer in the same way, so it's very
Yeah.
difficult to find the space and opportunity to feel like I'm really working through something with
Mm.
professionals, not somebody who's just a reader, and that's great. I love just readers. So I really much appreciate your guys' time and energy for sure.
Thank you so much. Again, this is why we do what we do, because we want to help voices like you who are telling good stories and trying to tell good stories, get them out there. So yeah, we love getting to meet new storytellers and just encourage them to keep going because the world needs your story. So yeah, again, anyone who's listening, please send in your story. I promise that this is for free, and we love to just give honest help to writers who are doing important work and trying to heal our world and telling the better story of tomorrow. So thank you again, everyone, for listening, and we will talk to you later.
Bye, guys.